Phoenix Police are testing a new tool. It's a small camera worn on the uniform. It records video and audio of what an officer sees and the people he or she interacts with.
We want to give our officers tools that help them do their job better. We believe that this technology will help them do just that.
You have no description of him or a vehicle is pretty.
To help determine the effectiveness of uniform-mounted cameras, Phoenix Police are taking part in a study conducted by the Center for Violence Prevention and Community Safety at Arizona State University. Hi, I'm Michael White, an associate professor at the ASU School of Criminology and Criminal Justice located here in downtown Phoenix. There's a movement in American law enforcement toward what's called smart policing, using technology, data, and analysis to improve effectiveness. In this program, we'll take a closer look at the Phoenix Police body-mounted camera project. Its goal is twofold: to see if cameras can improve the outcomes of criminal cases, and to see if they can be an effective tool in dealing with domestic violence. We'll talk to the commander in charge of the precinct where the video cameras are being tested.
One of the things that we hope will come out of the study ultimately, and what we're seeing again early on, is that the technology has a civilizing effect among those that we serve.
We'll also learn about some of the technology issues created by deploying 56 officers with video cameras. Plus, we'll talk to the criminologist leading the study.
As agencies consider adopting this technology, I think they need to consider the benefits as well as the potential consequences that can result from it.
My name is Michael White with Arizona State University, and today we're talking to Commander Mike Kurtenbach of the Phoenix Police Department and Dr. Charles Katz from Arizona State University. And we're talking about the Phoenix Police Department body-worn camera project. Commander Kurtenbach, can you tell us why the Phoenix Police Department decided to invest in body-worn cameras?
The reality is that law enforcement can't do its job without the support of the community. We had an unfortunate incident in 2010 where there was a physical confrontation between one of our officers and a City of Phoenix council member. What that incident highlighted was a clear disconnect between the Phoenix Police Department and the community that we serve. As a result, the city manager put together a task force that looked at ways where we could bridge that gap. There were specific recommendations that were born out of that task force. One of those recommendations challenged us to pilot a dash camera system. Because of the way we do business in municipal law enforcement, we don't do a lot of work inside of the car. So the chief at the time thought it prudent to pilot body-worn cameras. And that really was the impetus behind this effort.
Okay, and what are the primary goals that the police department is seeking to achieve with this project?
Well, when we talk about accountability and accountability to the community that we serve, one word that you hear repeatedly is transparency. We believe that our officers, by and large, do a phenomenal job each and every day, and video will show just that. But it's really incumbent upon us as an organization to prove that we are doing things the right way in accordance with policy and with law. So there are a number of areas that we're really evaluating when it comes to this deployment. Specifically, we want to give our officers tools that help them do their job better. We believe that this technology will help them do just that. When the officers are wearing the cameras, there are certain things that they see, there are certain calls that they go out on that can't be replicated in the sterile environment of a courtroom. There are certain details that perhaps, because an officer is dealing with multiple issues at one time, that the camera will capture that upon review later can refresh their memory. So that's what we want to do first and foremost. We want to evaluate this technology and how it relates to helping officers do their job better, with a specific emphasis on domestic violence. And when we think about domestic violence cases, it only makes sense. When I talk about that sterile environment of a courtroom, there are things when you go through the front door of a home that you just, quite frankly, can't replicate in a courtroom that can show very clearly behaviors, damage, injuries, etc. But when we talk about transparency, what the cameras in the technology will show is if we are doing our job the right way. And conversely, are citizens conducting themselves in an appropriate manner? So we'll have the opportunity to evaluate officer behavior, specifically as it relates to citizens' complaints, use of force, and whatnot, and then citizen behavior, whether it be resisting arrest, force used on officers, those types of things.
Okay, I know that there was an intensive bid process, and that Phoenix Police Department ended up selecting the VView system. Could you describe how the system works?
Absolutely. In speaking of the bid process, we spent nearly a year in a scope of work committee because we wanted to be very careful and very deliberate about what kind of system our officers would ultimately wear. We issued the scope of work. We ultimately evaluated multiple camera systems, and the system that we chose for our purposes is the VView camera system. VView is a self-contained camera about the size of a pager. It's worn in the center of the officer's uniform shirt, and quite frankly, its simplistic design was something that was very attractive to our officers. It has a window. When the window is pushed down, the camera is recording. There's a green background around the lens so that anybody who is being recorded, if they're paying attention, can see that the device is recording. At the conclusion of the event, all the officer has to do is close the camera lens and the recording is stopped.
Okay, can you describe the process that the department leadership and yourself went through to ensure that you had officer buy-in with the technology?
Absolutely, and that piece is critical, and it's something that can't be overlooked. So there are 56 cameras that are deployed in one of 8 police precincts in the city of Phoenix, the Maryvale Precinct. And as the commander of the Maryvale Precinct, I felt it was my job to effectively educate the officers on the technology and to help them understand where we as a department were going with the technology. So from the very beginning, I went to every briefing. We work on a 4-10 deployment model, so whether it be day shift, second shift, night shift, I went to those briefings and I talked to the officers about what our intentions were, what we were trying to accomplish, the things that I mentioned before about what we were trying to measure. But more importantly, what I wanted them to understand when we speak about transparency with the community, that it's really important that we're just as transparent with our officers. So that aforementioned scope of work group that we put together, I challenged officers from the Maryvale Precinct to be part of that process. I wanted them to realize that we weren't doing this in the cover of darkness or behind closed doors and then just giving them a product that they had to wear. And there were 2 officers in this precinct that actually participated in that work group, helped to develop the scope of work that ultimately went into the request for proposal that was issued nationwide. And then when it came down to actually testing the different camera products that we were provided through that process, I had 2 officers and a sergeant that participated in the actual evaluation. So again, this wasn't management dictating to the officers what equipment they were going to wear. It was truly inviting them to be part of the process, then to evaluate the equipment and then help with the selection.
Okay, great. And how has the community been involved in the project?
I mentioned early on the city manager created a task force after the unfortunate incident involving one of our officers and a Phoenix City councilman. That task force still meets regularly. So we've provided them updates with how we've deployed the technology, what some of the initial feedback has been from our officers and those in the community that now understand that they're being recorded as well. And as part of my job, I give presentations regularly, whether it be formal presentations before the Phoenix City Council or within the community. And one of the things I like to do is actually wear the camera and initially not say anything to anybody because they don't realize that it's there with as much equipment as we wear, and then turn the camera on and then let them know why we're using the tool, what the tool, how the tool is being applied, etc.
So it's my understanding the officers have been wearing the cameras for a few months now. Can you tell me how some of the citizens have been responding to the officers wearing the cameras?
Initially, again, a lot of the citizens didn't even realize they're being recorded, and the officers don't generally tell folks that they're being recorded. But if they ask, what we found to be very interesting is the effect on behavior. So if somebody was being indignant or otherwise argumentative, we've seen, obviously anecdotally at this point, that it really changes behavior for the better. And those citizens that are behaving properly don't necessarily welcome the technology either, though, because we're recorded almost in every facet of our lives, whether we go to the grocery store or to the mall or wherever the case may be. So even those citizens that are behaving properly, if you will, aren't thrilled about being recorded. But one of the things that we hope will come out of the study ultimately, and what we're seeing again early on, is that the technology has a civilizing effect among those that we serve.
Can you talk about some of the challenges that you've faced in terms of implementation of the technology?
Again, there's fear of the unknown when it comes to the officers. Before we employed this pilot program, we did a smaller pilot 2 years earlier. And as a result of that pilot, there was an investigation in one of our officers, and that officer was subsequently terminated. Because of that, there was a belief that management would use video to investigate officer behavior absent complaint. I think police officers understand by the nature of our job, if there's a complaint, that complaint is going to be properly investigated. But the concern that I heard over and over again was that management, and there's that broad term, would go on fishing expeditions to look for behavior that wasn't previously reported. Now, it's our job to look at video. There's video that's in our possession, and that's what we do. We audit video, we will look at video from time to time, and we encourage our supervisors, especially the first-line supervisors, to look at the videos that their officers record, but not for the express purpose of finding policy violations. And that was the chief concern. And once the officers realized that they do their job the right way, we know they do their job the right way, and this is a tool that can ultimately help them, that helped to remove that fear.
Could you also talk about some of the resource or logistical issues that have come up that were not anticipated?
That's a true reality of such a program. I mean, the idea of putting a camera on your uniform and deploying the camera is one that is very simple. And it's very easy, and it makes a lot of sense because of the information that you, again, can capture that might not otherwise be captured. You eliminate the mystery. It's no longer a he said, she said, but you're creating a lot of data. And so what do you do with that data? Generally speaking, you can save that data in a cloud-based system, or you can have storage that's dedicated for the pilot. Here in Phoenix, we have dedicated storage. But again, then how do you manage that? And here's the best example that I can provide. An officer goes out on an incident. I'll use the domestic violence example again. It's a domestic violence assault. He or she documents the behavior, authors a departmental report, let's say affects an arrest. That's easy because we have that initial departmental report. We can find that video and we can attach that video to that case file for a criminal prosecution. But where it really gets important is, what if there are 3 other officers that are out there, 2 other officers, and all of them have cameras? Maybe they interviewed witnesses or other family members, and they have information that is germane to the case. Obviously that information is discoverable. So it's important to provide all of that information to the prosecuting and defense attorneys. That's when it becomes manpower intensive, is managing all of that video. Out here we have 56 officers that are wearing the cameras. This isn't voluntary. They're assigned to a geographic area. The officers wear the cameras. So for their 40-hour shift, they're wearing the camera. So 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, we have officers out here that are providing street coverage that are wearing the technology. So it's managing that data that's created. It's ensuring that those videos are attached to cases, that those videos are passed on. That's where it becomes manpower intensive.
From the police department's perspective, what would you say is the greatest success so far with the project?
I mentioned early on that our officers, and whether it be the Phoenix Police Department or any agency, they do a phenomenal job. They do the job the right way the vast majority of the time. And it's a difficult job. It isn't something that is black and white quite often. And so when you look at videos, and we've had some incidents that have raised some eyebrows, if you will, during the time that we've deployed the cameras. And you have the opportunity to see that the officers did everything the right way. They treated citizens with dignity, respect, and professionalism, that they conducted themselves amazingly under some very trying circumstances. That's what's been very exciting for us to see. And then when you in turn share that information with the officers, that just validates that this isn't Big Brother, that this is capturing what they do each and every day, and it's protecting them. It's protecting them from frivolous complaints. It's protecting them from baseless allegations. It's showing that when force is used, that the force used was appropriate. That's been one of the biggest takeaways so far.
The Phoenix project is part of the Bureau of Justice Assistance's Smart Policing Initiative. And Dr. Katz, as part of that project, you're leading a team that's conducting an evaluation of the project. Can you describe the major components of the project evaluation?
Sure. The Maryvale Precinct, we basically divided it into two squads. One squad that has over 50 officers is being assigned the cameras, which they're required to wear, and the other side is not. They're not required to wear the camera. And over time, we started to collect information roughly 6 to 8 months before the cameras went into the field. And we started to collect information on officer beliefs about cameras, satisfaction with the idea of using a body camera out in the field, any concerns that they might have. We also started to collect some information on police-citizen encounters, collecting information regarding use of force, collecting information about complaints against the police. And we've continued to collect that information roughly every 3 months. Shortly before cameras were implemented, shortly after cameras were implemented, and then we'll be continuing with that through a year. So we're collecting 3 sources of data. One of them is official data, looking at police complaint data, and we're also looking at domestic violence information regarding calls for service, arrests, and such. We're collecting data through self-report, in terms of, as I mentioned before, officer satisfaction with the cameras, and then we're also using a contact survey. Our idea is to focus on the impact of the cameras in 2 different ways. One is on domestic violence, in which how some of the data can be used, whether it's by the police or prosecutors, toward focusing on prosecutions and achieving greater convictions. And then we're also focusing on how the information is having an impact on complaints against the police and whether or not those complaints are sustained.
And I realize that the evaluation is ongoing, but can you talk about some of the preliminary results that you've seen?
Sure. One of the major issues that we've come across is just the profound impact that it has not just on the police organization itself, but on organizations outside of the police department. Within the police department, we don't just have it affecting patrol and management within those sections, but we also have impact on with respect to data technicians. We have an impact with respect to investigators and them having the ability to take a look at some of this information for investigative purposes, how that information is used perhaps by internal affairs, taking a look at how that information is stored, a number of different ways in which that information moves throughout the organization. And then outside of the organization, we also have a number of issues related to how to get information to the prosecutor's office, depending upon which prosecutor's office we're talking about, the labor that's involved in redacting information to whether it to be the courts for evidence purposes, whether it be to other individuals, and some of the complications that can arise from redaction. Some of the other issues that we've seen is there appears to be quite a bit of change over time in officers' attitudes about the product. At first, we found a little bit of ambivalence about the product. Satisfaction declined quite rapidly before the cameras went into the field, and then following implementation in the field, we started to see an uptick in interest in the cameras. It appears as if there are a number of officers who their satisfaction with the cameras increased quite significantly, although they're still in the vast minority of individuals that support camera use.
Interest has spiked, especially because of the recent federal court ruling involving the New York City Police Department. The experience that Phoenix has had here, I think, is invaluable to agencies that are considering this technology. If you could, both of you, just talk about some of the lessons learned. If someone was going to come to you and ask you, you know, what are the things I need to know about this technology? What kind of lessons learned would you convey to them?
From the police department perspective, I think it's important to be very deliberate in your process. This isn't something that you should jump into hastily, quite the opposite. And I'm not suggesting that this becomes some laborious, drawn-out effort, but you need to really establish what your goals are. What are you trying to accomplish? And then within that, involve all segments of the organization. This can't be a management decision alone. Those officers or supervisors, in our case, since we have both officers and first responder sergeants wearing it, involve them in the process to, if not get the buy-in, at least remove the mystery. And then, as Dr. Katz referenced, it's important to understand that this impacts much more than just the police department. It impacts much more than just this precinct, in this case, where the cameras are, and understanding, process mapping that, understanding who is affected, and bringing all of them to the table as well. So you get that buy-in, so whatever system you create, and I'm not talking about what camera system, I'm talking about what processes you put in place for your organization, that you do it deliberately in a manner that makes sense so that you accomplish whatever mission it is you're trying to accomplish.
Dr. Katz?
Yes, I think that as agencies consider adopting this technology, I think they need to consider the benefits as well as the potential consequences that can result from it, depending upon what your agency is interested in. Are you interested in the technology from a crime fighting standpoint, evidence collection, use of evidence in court, and what kind of an impact that might have on your agency? Are you using this technology to address issues related to police accountability as well as the accountability of the public is one issue. But then we also have the consequences of this technology. Just like any medication, particularly at the end of a commercial, you'll hear a list of potential problems that can be associated with a medication. This is the same thing with this technology. There are consequences to implementing technology, and we aren't confident that we know about all of the potential side effects that can result from implementing technology, whether it's resistance from the police, whether it has to do with its use in lawsuits, whether it's the positives or the negatives. We also have no idea of the impact that it has on officer productivity in terms of whether or not there's been some concern that it reduces police productivity because they're less interested in making stops and turning on their cameras and addressing some of those types of issues. We don't know at this point really what the benefits are, and we don't know really what the consequences are. That's the purpose of this study, and we're hoping to have those results in the next 3 months.
Okay, thank you both for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The results of the study will be published on the ASU Center for Violence Prevention and Community Safety website at cvpcs.asu.edu. I'm Michael White. Thanks for joining me for a closer look at the Phoenix Police Body-Mounted Camera Project.